We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes. We're here to talk about the College Football Playoff Committee and its rankings, which came out Tuesday night. We're doing this Tuesday morning. 2 weeks of regular season played to go, and Blake, not a lot changed when the committee came out with its rankings on Tuesday evening.
No, I don't think anything's changed. If you listen to our 40-minute spill last week on the rankings and us dissecting every single possible scenario known to man, you've pretty much got all you need to know about this week's rankings. TCU, we said they lost. That probably removes them from the equation. They won, so they're still in there, and the setup is perfect for the committee at this point because you've got the 4 unbeaten teams in the top 4 spots. But as we know, one team will not be unbeaten without question because Ohio State and Michigan will have to play each other. So, and that's where things will start to get interesting at that point. And of course, if someone gets upset that shouldn't, again, whether that's a Georgia, Tennessee, anybody, right? TCU plays at Baylor, Michigan plays Illinois this weekend. Those kind of games, right? Those are the ones that would obviously change everything. But if you say that everything is going to go according to plan,
It
what we know
never
for
does.
sure, it never does. But what we know for sure is that Ohio State and Michigan will have one loss. They are sitting in the 2 and 3 spots. LSU's moved up to 6 now, which I don't think is surprising. So you got 3 SEC teams in the top 6. The scenario has not changed. It's the same discussion we had last week, and we've had for multiple weeks now. What will they do in the LSU winning the SEC championship scenario? A long way still to go to get there, but that is still the one that would cause the most issues for the committee, given if everything else goes according to plan with Georgia and Tennessee.
Okay, I want to start at the top and run down some teams and some scenarios briefly. Okay, Georgia wins out. Georgia's in, no question. Georgia wins out, which would include beating Kentucky and Georgia Tech. I do not expect Georgia to have any problems with either. The Kentucky game is on the road. That didn't stop Vanderbilt a week ago. And then Georgia Tech is in Athens. 2 teams which Georgia will have overmatched, although Kentucky did play Georgia tougher last year than most teams did, just as a point of information that I don't think means much right now. One loss Georgia, most people seem to think if Georgia were to lose in the SEC title game, Georgia gets in anyway, and I think that's probably correct.
Yeah, I think Georgia's in.
Okay.
I just don't. Now, look, here's the thing, right? And that's where it gets tricky is if LSU wins the SEC championship, then it becomes it's not just well, what do you do with Tennessee because they beat LSU, right? It's what do you do with Georgia because they beat Tennessee who beat LSU. So it's
Yeah.
that, again, I think most of the people have pushed the discussion towards you could not leave Tennessee out because they would have beaten LSU, the SEC champion. But then in Georgia's case, it's like, well, can you leave Georgia out if they beat Tennessee? And you're making the argument for Tennessee. So, and the 3 teams are not getting in. It becomes interesting.
Well, it becomes a 3-way tie at that point, and then nobody in that 3-way tie breaks the tie by virtue of a better. In other words, everybody can point the finger either way and say, "Well, we beat one of these teams, but we lost to another one of these teams."
They all beat each other. Yeah.
Now, if conference championships don't matter, Tennessee, in my mind, I mean, if you want to say Georgia gets in anyway, and then you make it a 2-team tiebreak between Tennessee and LSU, Tennessee beat LSU resoundingly in Baton Rouge. To me, that would matter, but I don't think that's how the committee probably processes it. It becomes a 3-team tiebreaker, and then LSU's got a conference title, which we know means things. Again, I'm not endorsing that view. I'm just stating it. So now, if you put Georgia on one pedestal, and again you compare Tennessee and LSU just head to head, maybe you have an interesting scenario whereby Tennessee does go to the playoff and LSU is left home, but that just seems unlikely.
Yeah, I'm with you. So there's one scenario, I suppose.
Okay, Big Ten. Question is, does Big Ten get in more than one team? I think Ohio State is the better team between Ohio State and Michigan. If Ohio State wins out, that would include beating Michigan next week. Games in between. Ohio State's got a game with Maryland, which is pretty good, and Michigan's got a game with Illinois, which has lost some luster. I don't know that those really matter unless either team loses, and then you get to the Big Ten title game where you've got Illinois, Iowa, Purdue, Minnesota awaiting either Michigan or Ohio State. I don't know how that tiebreaker goes. But, I mean, not a win against any of those teams that moves the needle in the Big Ten title game. So, basically, whichever Ohio State or Michigan gets there, it's just take care of business.
Yeah, pretty simple, I think, for those two. The debate on the actual resumes of both to this point, I think, are valid because they don't have the best resumes, but they're both unbeaten. And again, one will not be. Both could not, depending on if there's upsets. But if they meet undefeated, again, that we know one will lose, and that will make the setup a lot more interesting because again, that we haven't necessarily we factored in. We know someone's going to lose, but we haven't factored in really going down the process of the resumes and those kind of things as compared to who they will be judged against, knowing that one of those teams will have a loss. So,
well, one little point here, I don't know how much this gets talked about. Ohio State's win over Notre Dame means a little bit more now than it did, say, a month or two ago. Both Ohio State and Michigan beat Penn State. Ohio State's was at Penn State, so that's a nice win. Penn State is 11 in the college football rankings. Ohio State has beaten Wisconsin and Iowa at home. Michigan's also beaten Iowa. That was on the road. Again, I think the issue is, let's say Ohio State wins out. What does a one-loss Michigan team versus a one-loss Tennessee discussion look like?
I
would take Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, and let's talk about the Vols for a minute, okay? Because we talk about Ohio State getting a win over Notre Dame. It's a little more attractive right now than it was. Look out for Florida. That win over Florida that Tennessee scored back at the end of September is now a little better than people think. You're seeing the Gators starting to get into the top 25 in the computer polls that I trust. Florida may be in the top 20 by that point. So Tennessee is now got some good wins. Of course, it beat Alabama. It won at LSU. The Florida game is a good win. The Kentucky win has lost some luster. But the win at Pitt is what I'd say an NIT type win. You might be able to say the same thing for Tennessee's blowout of Missouri. Missouri had edged its way into the top 50 before Tennessee just took the wheels off Missouri. Tennessee is not going to do much in its remaining games to move the needle. Game at South Carolina, games at Vandy. Those teams are probably both outside, well, Vandy for sure, the top 50 teams in college football. So I don't see that changing anything. Of course, Tennessee's one loss was at Georgia. TCU, we haven't gotten to TCU. TCU's wins at Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, at Kansas, at SMU. TCU's got a bunch of what I call NIT type wins if this were basketball. Oklahoma State, maybe Texas Tech. Texas Tech might be a little better than that. Oklahoma, West Virginia. Games remaining at Baylor and with an Iowa State team the computers still like. I mean, with TCU, that resume is based on the number to the right of the dash, which is a 0. In my opinion, sometimes that gets a little bit overrated, but TCU would have that and a conference title, and I don't think the Horned Frogs would be left out. Question is, could a one-loss TCU team get in over, say, a one-loss Tennessee or Michigan?
I tend to think not, but again, it's how you we've said it. It's how you win and how you lose, and those things will matter in that scenario. It's if they do have that loss, how do they lose? And you can say it's fair or unfair, but that will matter. And the same with Michigan, or if they lose to Ohio State, it's how you lose that will really matter. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll find out because I think that would be the interesting part because, here's the thing: all things equal, right now, right? If you, yeah, I don't know. It would be something where I still think Tennessee, and we're not just saying this because we're an SEC channel, but I think when you compare the resumes, I still
Yeah.
believe Tennessee would have the nod over both in a one-loss scenario. I just think TCU, again, whether you think it's fair or unfair, if TCU loses a game the rest of the way, I just think they're going to have a hard time, assuming everyone else takes care of business around them. I just feel like they would struggle to maybe stay in there. But again, we'll see, because again, it matters how you lose and how you win. So
Well, and there's two discussions, right? There's resume, and then who do you think is better? I think Tennessee right now has got both of those on the teams that are sort of in that discussion. TCU, USC, we haven't gotten to the Trojans yet. The Trojans right now, all that's going to depend on what it does ahead, because USC's resume right now not all that hot. I mean, it's got, we talk about NIT wins. USC's got those over Oregon State and Washington State, and then it's got a bunch of CBI and worse type wins, using a basketball analogy. So the strength of Southern Cal's resume is going to depend on winning at UCLA, beating Notre Dame, which again, that is a little bit more of a feather in your cap now if you do it than it was a few weeks ago. And then the Pac-12 title game, I think there are still 5 contenders for that. It's USC, UCLA, Utah, Washington State, and who am I leaving out? Oregon. So I don't know how that shakes out. But
yeah,
USC's right now is all depending on the Trojans running the table against those teams, and then what do those wins mean?
yeah. I mean, look, they got two top 20 opportunities coming up next, and it's at UCLA this weekend, and they got, they host Notre Dame the following weekend. It will be easier said than done, And that, I mean, look, and let's be honest too. Like USC, if we're talking about how you win and how you lose, their one loss this season by a single point at Utah, and I think there's something to that when you start comparing. I think what the fascinating question would be, and what we just tied in here, let's say if TCU slips up somewhere, and let's say you're looking at a scenario where TCU has one loss, Tennessee has one loss, USC has one loss as the Pac-12 champion, and Clemson has one loss as the ACC
Yeah.
champion. Then I think things get very interesting. And again, we're just going to assume, well, we're not going to assume, we're just going to say in this scenario, LSU loses to Georgia in the SEC championship, so they move out of the discussion. Then I think that would be a that would be a fun one to try to figure out, because Tennessee would not be a champion in that. They would not be a conference champion. USC would be, Clemson would be, TCU, I guess would still be maybe in that scenario. I'm not sure how we would play that, but again, let's just assume they all have one loss. Then I think that's where things get really interesting. But I think here's what I think is clear. I think it's clear that the bottom of the barrel right now, in terms of what the committee views as the power. I think the ACC is clearly, Clemson's at 9 with one loss. A 2-loss Alabama is still ahead of Clemson, right? And I think that, the Pac-12 is gaining a little bit of steam here, because I think if USC can win out, they're going to be right there, and they may get in. But I think just seeing where Tennessee and LSU are slotted, I think it's very clear that they're still in pretty good spots, even though LSU has no room for error. Tennessee doesn't either, as a one-loss team that isn't going to play in a conference championship. But, I don't think USC is in a bad spot right now, if, again, they can win these next 2 games, because all that's going to do is help their resume, if they can win at UCLA and beat Notre Dame.
Okay, yeah, and I think maybe we can make some judgments about what the committee thinks about conferences. And right now we're going to talk about the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Okay, TCU at 4. Other teams in the Big 12 that the committee has in its top 25: Kansas State at 15, Oklahoma State at 22. I think that's generous. That's it. The Pac-12 has got USC at 7, a 2-loss Utah team at 10, a 2-loss Oregon team at 12, a 2-loss UCLA team at 16, a 2-loss Washington team at 17. So, yeah, I think just looking at that and
Oregon
making a
State at 23.
judgment, yeah, and Oregon State, and that's a good team too. So, yeah, I mean, the Pac-12 is the one that if you were Tennessee, you are concerned with because there is
Rooting
some
against
evidence.
USC. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's see what other SEC teams or SEC teams period in the college football playoff rankings. Georgia 1, Tennessee 5, LSU 6, Alabama 8, Ole Miss 14. I think watch for Florida to slip in there potentially for whatever that's worth. So I mean, it's not like the committee is sneezing at the SEC either.
Here's some good numbers for you. Cole Kubelik put this out on Twitter last night. Here's just kind of some fun numbers to look at. If you look at just the overall opponent record, if we're looking at the teams in the chase here right now, okay? Georgia's opponent record 62-38, LSU 61-39, Tennessee 60-41, Clemson 57-43, North Carolina 53-41, TCU 52-48, Ohio State 49-52, USC 46-54, Michigan 45-57. So if you're just looking at the overall opponent record, right now, again, we know that's going to factor in Michigan's case, a non-conference schedule that was not great, but that matters. Strength of schedule, I think Michigan has the worst strength of schedule. I think USC is not far away from them. But again, that will get better with the next two games. So like those are just, I don't know. Those are kind of, there's a lot of numbers here that you can really look at. But I think if you're Tennessee, the two teams you have concern with right now are very,
LSU,
very clear. Well, I guess,
and
there's three
USC.
teams you have concern with because it's TCU winning out because that takes the spot guaranteed. LSU winning the SEC championship, obviously that you don't want to. You would have a case, but being in that spot where it is trying to figure out the Tennessee LSU Georgia debate, that would get tricky. And I think USC winning out, the record, we can talk about the numbers and the record, but I think if USC wins out and wins the Pac-12, again, what happens in front of them matters.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying they should, but I do think there's a scenario where they jump Tennessee and move into that spot if that spot is available. So yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at this and letting it sink in what we think of conferences based on what the committee seems to think of them. And I think Tennessee against a one-loss TCU or a one-loss Clemson would get the edge in those scenarios unless the committee just says conference championship trumps a lot of other stuff. Because Tennessee clearly has A, the better resume, and B is clearly the better team. And you're like, well, you guys are SEC guys, you're biased. Well, I mean, let's look at the computers. Look at the ones that people respect, the Sagarins, the FPIs, SP Plus, those kind of computers. Everybody has got Tennessee being clearly better than both TCU and Clemson. So there's that. Again, USC, the more that I think about it, I have sort of discounted USC to this point. But Southern Cal, if it gets to that point with one loss, is going to have three nice wins. And that's going to include UCLA, Notre Dame, and whoever the Trojans face in the Big 12 title game, which again could be any of four other teams.
But I think we can say it's fair that they have the toughest path the rest of the way. If you compare.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah. And I think, again, if listen, they will have perhaps earned it if they are the ones that do get a nod here because they clearly have the toughest path the rest of the way. So,
okay, let's go through that, okay? Let's just do to just arbitrarily top 5 wins. Tennessee's will be Alabama and Knoxville, LSU on the road, Florida and Knoxville, Kentucky and Knoxville, and at Pitt out South Carolina, however you want to break that down. You might even drop Kentucky below those, although I wouldn't. And for kicks, throw in Missouri which is probably 60-ish in the computers. But I mean, Missouri's 4-6. That's not going to do anything for anybody. USC's at that point will be fill in the blank Big Ten title game on a neutral field at UCLA, at Oregon State, Notre Dame at home, and Washington State, which is pretty decent. Washington State's a top 30-ish type team at this point in the computers that I like. So there's that, maybe more closer to 35. But no, then at that point, I think it's close. I still think Tennessee's the better team. I mean, all the computers are going to say it. You watch them play. They scare your shorts off when they've got the ball, and the defense isn't as bad as it has been made out to be. So I still think in that scenario, if you're comparing resumes, Tennessee's is pretty competitive.
Yeah, I just think you're Tennessee. It's pretty simple. Root against TCU.
Well,
and
and it's
USC.
going to be what do they do with conference championships again? So yeah.
I think you're rooting against TCU and USC, and again LSU. That discussion could be had as well, as we know. So yeah, but I think those are public enemy number 1 and number 2 for Tennessee right now. It's TCU and USC. I think because you just again I'm with you. We've talked about it. I mean we've said there's a reason Tennessee's sitting at 5 because they're the next team up aside from the 4 unbeaten teams, and the committee wouldn't just place them there if they didn't think that they were basically the next team to slide into the discussion, assuming they went out. So yeah, I mean they're sitting in a fine spot. It's just as less games are left, now you're really in the stage where knowing you don't get that conference championship game, you're playing the root against this team and this team. So,
all right, I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to let you marinate on this while we give a word to our sponsor. What do we think happens? How does this play out the rest of the way? And before you give me your answer, a shout out to our sponsor, Stakes. You can predict sports better than the crowd. For a chance to win NFTs with Stakes, players can submit their sports predictions against friends, other fans, and influencers forever. Don't let your sports genius go overlooked. Join Stakes and have the best predictions captured in the moment. Go to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 for a double welcome bonus. Free to join, free to play. Help out those who help our channel. And go visit Stakes today. Okay, Blake, let's start at the top. Georgia. Remaining games, Kentucky and Lexington, Georgia Tech and Athens, LSU in the title game. Do we see Georgia losing to anybody?
As of right now, I think the percentages are in Georgia's favor to win out.
Yeah, so let's pencil in Georgia as the 1 seed. Ohio State at Maryland this weekend, at Michigan the next weekend. The Big Ten title game against Illinois, Iowa, Purdue, Minnesota. I'm not sure what the tiebreaker is there. Well, it's either Ohio State or Michigan. I would take. Well, that is in Ann Arbor, so that gets interesting.
Now,
The winner of that game is
hold on. The Ohio State Michigan game is
it's at Ohio State.
Yeah, I was going to make sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, okay. Let's take the winner of that game. I will say Ohio State wins and runs the table.
Yeah, I think it'd be closer than people think. But
Okay.
again, if we're just going to give the nod to the home team, then we'll just give the nod to Ohio State.
Well, how about this? Ohio State or Michigan?
Okay.
In other words, the Big Ten is going to get a spot, and
Yes.
probably the number 2 spot. Okay. Yeah. TCU. Honestly, I think they're going to lose one somewhere. Whether that's at Baylor, Iowa State, or the championship game.
Who are they in line to play in the championship game?
Kansas State, I believe. I don't know if that's been clinched. Should have looked that up.
Yeah, we should probably look that up because I think that's important. Yeah, I mean, I I think that TCU is. I mean, look, could they lose one? Yes, but it's like I thought the Texas game would be the one they lose, and they found a way to win that one.
Okay, TCU is officially in the title game. It's just a question of who it plays. So,
okay, well, I mean, it's just to me. I think it's just. Do you think TCU loses in the championship game? Because I think they'll win their next two. Baylor won't be easy, but I think they'll win their next two. So,
yeah. I mean, it's Kansas State is probably the team that's going to be there. Yeah, it's kind of a mess after that.
this is where we start tying ourselves in knots here because there's so many different scenarios that can play out. Yeah.
And I kicked our friends at 5:38 out of the discussion this week.
Well, I thought that would save us
some
time,
of the scenarios
but it did not. Yeah.
No, it did not. So yeah, let's say TCU. Yeah, I mean Kansas State. I just don't see TCU winning out of Kansas State.
I need to know who they're going to play. Like that's what it comes down to.
Okay.
Like I need to know who they're going to play in the Big 12 championship. Are they going to be the favorite? Probably, but I still would like to know the opponent before I can fully judge their path.
Okay, Tennessee, we know what's ahead for the Vols. At South Carolina, at Vandy. I think Tennessee will win handily in each. We've already eliminated LSU. So it's really Tennessee, Southern Cal.
I think USC
TCU for that final spot.
They have the toughest
unless
schedule.
Unless they lost Michigan or Ohio State.
Yeah. USC has the toughest schedule. I think they're going to lose one somewhere. That UCLA, Notre Dame, and then they're going to play a really good team in the Pac-12 championship. So
yeah,
that's a gauntlet. And if you say the percentages, I think they lose one of those, but I don't know which one.
So the more I talk through it, I like Tennessee's chances to get in. I mean, I've felt that way for weeks. Tennessee might even jump up and get to 3.
I mean, that will take some. I don't think they're jumping an undefeated TCU though, right?
Well, I think TCU is going to lose a game.
Oh, okay. Well, then in that scenario, then yeah, I guess they would. Yeah.
I think USC is going to lose a game.
Clemson still got Miami. I let's just have this discussion to quickly throw it out of the way here. Clemson still got Miami, South Carolina, North Carolina. I don't think there's enough there for Clemson to get in, barring, as I've said before, just upsets all over the place ahead of them. I think it's clear the ACC is the least valued in this group here. So I just think it's hard for them. They may get close, but it would take too much happening ahead of them, I think, for them to get in.
Well, if what happens that I think is going to happen, then I think Tennessee may be your 3, and it's just chaos for the 4 between, and maybe that's where a one-loss Michigan slips in.
Again, it's how the game's played. Like I'm telling you, how Ohio State Michigan is played. If they play a classic, I think they'll both get in. So they just won't play each other again. I mean, they made the championship.
Hey, then does the committee fudge the seeding a little bit?
Well, if it's a classic, then the winner's going to be 2, the loser's going to be 4, and somebody's at 3, either TCU, Tennessee, in that scenario, right?
Well, here's the thing. Let's say that it does come down to Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee is the 4 teams that get in, which I think are probably the 4 best teams in the country. Michigan's got an awful schedule, but that isn't – Michigan's not one of the best 4 teams in the country.
Yeah.
At that point, is the committee –
you are 100% doing the odd matchups. You're not doing the rematches. You're 100%.
Yes, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, you're 100% doing. You're going to put Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Tennessee. Yeah,
yeah, which I think you should.
Yeah, I don't think there's no. That doesn't do anything for anyone to do the rematches. I think which again, you could get. Don't get me wrong, you can still get it in the championship, right? But it will have taken another game to get there. I think you just switch the seating around, and so be it. So, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm rooting for because I do think that's the best 4 teams.
I tell you, I like TCU. Like I know there'll be people that will have their thoughts on this, but I think you got to give them some credit for what they've
Yeah.
done to this point. And again, we'll see if they lose a game, and if they do, then I don't think they're getting in. But I don't want to discount what they've done either. It's again, I know the Big 12 and we know where it's at, but they are unbeaten, and we'll see how it goes from here.
So here's my question: If it goes Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Tennessee 3, Michigan 4, do we clip this thing, put a timestamp on it, and brag about it later?
No, because guess what? If we went back and
More
clipped all the
likely, we're
stuff
going to
that
burn the film.
if we clip the stuff that we got wrong, we
Right.
have a lot of that to go
Right.
around. So,
That's true.
yeah, we don't want to just play to one party there, because there's plenty of clipping you can do if you want to go back and find everything we got wrong. So, but no, I'm with you. I think a lot of people outside of the SEC and Big Ten would hate that scenario, but I do think
Oh,
that would be I think that would be the most exciting scenario, just from a personal viewing standpoint, because I think that would be something to see the SEC. Because think about all of the SEC Big Ten discussions we've had over the years in terms
oh.
of, I mean, just think about the meltdown on either side. It would be something. So
All right. Let's do our audience a favor.
we're done.
You shorten these up into smaller clips a lot of times, and rebroadcast them for people who don't have the appetite to watch the whole thing. All right, here's our take presented by Stakes. We know nothing. Goodbye.
That's pretty much it.
You can cut that into a 5-second clip and have at it.
We do what everyone else does. We spend about 30 minutes trying to come up with hypothetical scenarios that when somebody loses this weekend, it all means nothing. So that's just how it works, right? So
Put that on TikTok. We
there
know
you go.
nothing. Goodbye. We know nothing presented by Stakes.
Yeah.
All right, I
There
think
you
we've
go.
covered it all.
That's it.
We left 5:38 out
Nah,
of
we're done.
time.
We're
Otherwise,
not
this
getting
would have
into
gone
that.
an hour,
We're not getting
which
into
they would
that.
have UNC getting in the playoffs, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, we're not getting into that.
All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Stakes. We're going to do some college basketball next. Yeah, we watched that too. So anyway, hit that subscribe button. Don't miss anything we do. Thanks for watching. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, and we'll see you again soon.